The air was crisp as Daniel Carter stepped out of his car, closing the door gently behind him. He pulled his coat tighter around himself, shielding against the cool breeze that swept through the cemetery. It had become something of a ritual for him to visit this place every year on this day, the anniversary of Laura's passing. 5 years had passed since she left, but the pain still lingered like an open wound that refused to heal completely. Daniel walked slowly along the gravel path, his shoes crunching softly against the stones. The cemetery was quiet today, almost eerily so. Only the sound of distant birdsong broke the silence. Tall oak trees lined the edges of the graveyard, their branches swaying lazily in the wind. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows across the ground. Somewhere far off, someone was tending to another grave, the faint rustling of tools barely audible over the gentle hum of nature. He stopped when he reached her headstone. It was simple, unassuming, just the way Laura would have wanted it. Her name, Laura Carter, was carved neatly into the smooth gray stone along with the dates of her birth and death. Below those words, a small inscription read, "Beloved wife and friend." Daniel knelt down carefully, brushing away a few stray leaves that had gathered at the base of the stone. Then he placed the bouquet of white roses he'd brought onto the grass in front of it. White roses were her favorite. They always had been. For a moment he just sat there, staring at the grave without saying anything. This part of the visit never got easier. No matter how many times he came here, no matter how prepared he thought he was, the weight of her absence always hit him hard. Sometimes he wondered if coming here was helping or making things worse. But he couldn't stop. Not now. Not ever. This was all he had left of her. "Hey, Laura," he finally said, his voice low and hesitant. "It's me again." He paused, unsure of where to go from there. What could he possibly say that hadn't already been said? His mind raced back to the last time he saw her alive, the hospital room, the machines beeping steadily, her pale face turned toward him as she whispered, "Take care of yourself." That was the last thing she said before slipping away forever. Those 4 words haunted him every single day. "I miss you," he continued after a while, speaking more freely now. "I know I say that every time I come here, but I really do. Life isn't the same without you. Some days it feels like everything is falling apart and I don't know how to fix it." He sighed heavily, running a hand through his short brown hair. "I try to keep busy, you know. Work takes up most of my time. And Rachel checks in on me once in a while, which helps, I guess. But it's not enough. Nothing feels right anymore." As he spoke, Daniel noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. At first, he assumed it was one of the groundskeepers or maybe another visitor passing by. But when he glanced sideways, he realized it wasn't either of those things. Standing, a few feet away, was a boy, a young boy, probably around 8 or 9 years old, judging by his height. The kid had messy brown hair and wide, curious blue eyes that seemed to pierce right through Daniel. There was something oddly familiar about those eyes, though he couldn't quite place why. The boy didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, shifting nervously from one foot to the other, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his oversized jacket. Daniel frowned slightly, wondering what the child was doing here. Was he lost? Or perhaps visiting a relative nearby? "You okay, buddy?" Daniel asked, his tone kind but cautious. "Are you looking for someone?" The boy hesitated, biting, his lip as though debating whether or not to answer. Finally, he took a step closer, his gaze fixed intently on Daniel. "Are you my dad?" he blurted out suddenly, his voice high-pitched and trembling. Daniel froze, his heart skipping a beat. For a split second, he thought he must have misheard. Surely the boy had said something else. Anything else. But no. The words hung in the air between them, undeniable and shocking. "My dad? What on earth was this kid talking about?" "I'm sorry," Daniel stammered, shaking his head in disbelief. "What did you just say?" The boy repeated himself, louder this time, but still uncertain. "Are you my dad?" Daniel stared at him, utterly speechless. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Who was this child? Why would he think Daniel was his father? None of it made any sense. Before Daniel could gather his thoughts enough to respond, the boy turned and bolted, disappearing quickly among the rows of tombstones. "Wait," Daniel called after him, scrambling to his feet. But it was too late. The boy was gone, vanishing into the mist like a ghost. All that remained was the echo of his hurried footsteps and the lingering question hanging heavy in the air. Daniel stood there for a long moment, his chest tight with confusion and unease. What had just happened? Was this some kind of prank? Or was there something deeper going on, something he didn't yet understand? Whatever the case, one thing was certain. This encounter wasn't over. Somehow he knew it wouldn't end here. Taking a deep breath, Daniel glanced back at Laura's grave. If only she were here to explain what was going on. She always had a way of making sense of even the most complicated situations. Without her, Daniel felt completely adrift, unsure of what to do next. Still, he couldn't ignore what had just happened. He needed answers, and he intended to find them, no matter how long it took. A dimly lit living room in the evening, with warm golden light spilling from a table lamp onto worn furniture. A man in his late 30s sits on a faded couch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, looking troubled. On the coffee table, in front of him is an old photo album open to a page showing a smiling woman, Laura, and the man together. In the background, a phone rests on the armrest of the couch, its screen glowing faintly as if recently used. The atmosphere feels heavy with tension and unresolved emotions. Daniel sat on the couch in his small apartment, staring blankly at the wall. The encounter at the cemetery replayed over and over in his mind like a broken record. Who was that boy? Why did he think Daniel was his father? None of it made sense. His thoughts were tangled, pulling him deeper into confusion with every passing second. He reached for the coffee table where an old photo album lay untouched for years. Dust coated its cover, but Daniel brushed it off and opened it carefully. Inside were pictures of happier times, pictures of Laura smiling brightly, her arms wrapped around him during vacations, birthdays, and lazy Sunday afternoons. She looked so alive, so full of joy. It hurt to look at those photos now, knowing she was gone forever. But tonight they felt different. They felt like clues. Flipping through the pages, Daniel paused at one particular picture. It was taken just months before Laura fell ill, a family barbecue at Rachel's house. Laura stood next to Ethan, Rachel's brother-in-law, laughing about something. Daniel remembered that day clearly. He hadn't thought much of it then, but now he wondered. What had Laura been hiding? His hands trembled as he closed the album and picked up his phone. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should call Rachel. It was late and she might not appreciate being disturbed. But this couldn't wait. He needed answers. Rachel answered on the third ring, her voice groggy with sleep. "Daniel, is everything okay?" "I'm sorry to bother you," he began, his tone apologetic but urgent. "But I need to ask you something important." There was a pause on the other end. "Okay. What is it? Do you know anything about Laura seeing someone else before she passed away?" The words came out rushed, almost stumbling over themselves. Daniel held his breath, waiting for her response. Another long silence followed. When Rachel finally spoke, her voice was cautious. "Why are you asking me this, Daniel?" "Because something happened today," he said, gripping the phone tighter. "At the cemetery, a boy approached me. He claimed I was his dad." Rachel gasped audibly. "What? Are you sure?" "Yes, I'm sure," Daniel snapped, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Look, I wouldn't be calling you if I didn't think it was serious. Did Laura ever mention anything to you, anything at all?" Rachel sighed heavily, and Daniel could hear the creak of bed springs as she shifted positions. "All right, listen. There's something I've kept from you because Laura asked me to. She told me not to say anything unless it was absolutely necessary." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What do you mean? What did she tell you?" She met someone briefly, Rachel admitted reluctantly. His name is Ethan. He works as a mechanic in town. Laura swore it wasn't serious. It was just a fling, she said. But she seemed conflicted about it. She begged me not to tell you because she didn't want to hurt you. The room spun around Daniel. Betrayal burned inside him, sharp and bitter. How could Laura keep something like this from him? And why hadn't Rachel told him sooner? Anger surged through him, but he forced himself to stay calm. Losing control wouldn't help him find answers. "Where can I find this Ethan?" he asked, his voice tight. Rachel hesitated again. "Daniel, please don't do anything rash. Laura wanted to protect you." "I'm not going to do anything rash," he interrupted sharply. "I just need to talk to him. Please, Rachel, tell me where he lives." After another sigh, Rachel gave him the address. Daniel thanked her curtly and hung up without saying goodbye. His hands shook as he grabbed his keys and headed out the door. The night air was colder than before, but he barely noticed. His mind was racing, piecing together fragments of memories he'd tried to forget. When Daniel arrived at Ethan's place, he found a modest home tucked away on a quiet street. The yard was cluttered with car parts and tools, and the porch light flickered, weakly. Taking a deep breath, Daniel knocked firmly on the door. Ethan answered after a few moments, wiping grease-stained hands on a rag. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and piercing green eyes. Recognition flashed across his face when he saw Daniel. "You must be Daniel," Ethan said, his voice low and wary. "Come in." Inside, the house smelled of oil and metal. Tools lined the walls and half-finished projects littered every available surface. Daniel followed Ethan to the kitchen, where they sat down at a small wooden table. "What do you want to know?" Ethan asked bluntly, meeting Daniel's gaze. "That boy who came to see me at the cemetery," Daniel began, his voice trembling slightly. "Is he mine?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "No, he's not yours. Not biologically, anyway." Daniel frowned. "Then whose is he?" "He's Laura's," Ethan replied quietly. "She came to me when she found out she was pregnant. She didn't want you to find out because she thought it would destroy your marriage. She made me promise not to interfere." Shock rippled through Daniel. "So you knew all along? You knew she was carrying a child and you didn't tell me?" "I promised her I wouldn't," Ethan defended, his voice rising slightly. "She was scared, Daniel. Scared of losing you. Can you blame her?" Daniel clenched his fists, struggling to process everything. "What about the boy? Where has he been all these years?" Ethan hesitated. Laura left him with her friend Anna. She thought it was best for him to grow up away from the complications of her life. After Laura died, Anna raised him as her own. But recently I learned that Noah, he's the boy's name, has started asking questions about his real parents. That's why I let him visit the cemetery. I thought maybe he'd find some closure. "Noah," Daniel whispered, testing the name on his tongue. It felt strange yet significant, like a missing puzzle piece clicking into place. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" "I didn't think it was my place," Ethan admitted. "And honestly, I didn't know how to approach you. Laura wanted to keep this secret buried, and I respected her wishes. Until now." Daniel stared. At the table, his mind reeling. So many years wasted, so many truths hidden. He felt anger, sadness, guilt, all swirling together in a chaotic storm. Yet beneath it all, there was a glimmer of hope. Noah was out there, alive and searching for answers. And Daniel realized he owed it to both Laura and their son to step up and face whatever came next. "Thank you for telling me," Daniel said, finally standing up. "I need to meet him." Ethan nodded. "If anyone deserves a chance to make things right, it's you. Just take it slow, okay? This isn't easy for him either." As Daniel drove home, the weight of the conversation settled heavily on his shoulders. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new uncertainties. But for the first time in years, he felt a spark of purpose igniting within him. No matter how complicated things got, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't turn his back on Noah. Not now. Not ever. A sunny afternoon in a small-town park, with soft sunlight filtering through the trees. A man in his late 30s sits on a wooden bench beside a young boy, both eating ice cream cones. The boy has messy brown hair and bright blue eyes, while the man looks thoughtful yet kind. Behind them, children play on swings and slides, their laughter filling the air. The atmosphere is warm and hopeful, with a sense of connection forming between the two figures. Daniel had always been a planner. He liked structure, predictability, knowing exactly what to expect. But life had thrown him a curveball he never saw coming, and now he found himself standing outside Ethan's mechanic shop early Saturday morning, feeling anything but prepared. Noah was supposed to arrive soon, and Daniel wasn't sure how to act or what to say. His stomach churned with nervous energy as he paced back and forth, rehearsing words in his head that somehow felt inadequate, no matter how many times he repeated them. When Noah finally appeared, walking hesitantly toward Daniel with his hands shoved into the pockets of his hoodie, Daniel stopped pacing and forced himself to smile. "Hey there," he said softly, trying not to sound too eager or too distant. "Thanks for meeting me." Noah shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "Ethan said I should come." "Well, I'm glad you did," Daniel replied, gesturing toward the nearby park. "How about we grab some ice cream and take a walk? My treat." For a moment, Noah looked skeptical, but then he nodded slowly. "Okay." They walked side by side to the park, an awkward silence stretching between them. Daniel glanced at Noah occasionally, noticing how the boy kept glancing around as if searching for an escape route. It broke his heart to see such wariness in someone so young. When they reached the ice cream stand, Daniel let Noah choose first. A chocolate cone with rainbow sprinkles, and got himself a plain vanilla one. As they sat down on a bench near the playground, Daniel decided to break the ice. "So, do you like school?" he asked casually, licking his ice cream. Noah shrugged, again. "It's okay, I guess. Math is hard." Daniel chuckled. "Math was always tough for me too, but hey, practice makes perfect, right?" Noah didn't respond, focusing instead on carefully licking his melting ice cream. Daniel tried not to push too hard. He knew this wouldn't be easy, not for either of them, but he also knew it was important to keep trying. After a while, Noah spoke up unexpectedly. "Why didn't you know about me before?" The question caught Daniel off guard. He set his ice cream cone aside and turned to face Noah fully. "I wish I had known," he admitted honestly. "Your mom, Laura, she wanted to protect me. She thought keeping you a secret would make things easier for everyone, but she didn't realize how much harder it would be later on, for all of us." Noah frowned, clearly processing this information. "Do you miss her?" "Every day," Daniel said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "She was amazing, kind, funny, smart. She loved fiercely even when it was hard, and she loved you more than anything." Noah looked down at his lap, his fingers tightening around the sticky napkin wrapped around his cone. "I don't remember her much. Just little things, like how she used to sing me songs before bed." Daniel swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "She had a beautiful voice. She'd sing me songs too, back when we were together. Mostly old folk tunes." They sat in silence for a while after that, each lost in their own thoughts. Eventually, Noah finished his ice cream and stood up. "Can we go to the swings?" "Sure," Daniel said, rising to follow him. At the swing set, Noah climbed onto one of the swings and started pumping his legs to gain momentum. Daniel stood nearby, watching as the boy soared higher and higher, his face lighting up with excitement. "You're pretty good at that," Daniel commented with a grin. "I've been practicing," Noah replied proudly, glancing over his shoulder. Then after a pause, he added, "You can push me if you want." Daniel hesitated for a second, surprised by the invitation. Then he stepped forward and gently pushed the swing, careful not to overwhelm Noah. With each push, the tension between them seemed to ease just a little bit more. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, Daniel realized they'd spent hours together without even noticing. For the first time since learning about Noah, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could build something meaningful here. A bond, a family, a future. But as they headed back to the mechanic shop where Ethan waited, Daniel reminded himself not to rush things. Trust took time, especially under circumstances like these. He resolved to be patient, to listen, and to show Noah that he truly cared, not because he owed it to Laura, but because he genuinely wanted to. Before parting ways, Daniel knelt down to Noah's level. "I had a great time today," he said sincerely. "We should do this again sometime." Noah nodded shyly. "Yeah, that sounds cool." And with that, they said goodbye, both carrying a newfound sense of possibility in their hearts. A tense courtroom scene bathed in soft, natural light streaming through tall windows. A man in his late 30s sits at one table, looking anxious but determined, while an older couple sits across from him, their expressions stern and unyielding. In the background, a judge in a black robe presides over the proceedings, her face calm and impartial. The atmosphere is heavy with emotion, emphasizing the stakes of the custody battle unfolding before them. Things were going well, or so Daniel thought. Over the past few weeks, he and Noah had started spending more time together. Weekends became a routine of shared meals, visits to the park, and quiet afternoons playing board games or watching movies. Slowly but surely, the walls between them began to crumble. Noah opened up more, sharing stories about growing up with Anna, his late adoptive mother who had passed away 2 years earlier. He talked about feeling out of place at school, struggling to fit in, and missing the warmth of having someone who truly understood him. For Daniel, these moments were bittersweet. On one hand, he cherished every second with Noah, grateful for the chance to connect with his son. On the other hand, guilt gnawed at him constantly. How could he have missed so much of Noah's life? What kind of father was he, stepping into the picture only now? But despite his doubts, Daniel vowed to make things right. He promised himself, and Laura, that he would do whatever it took to be there for Noah. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under Daniel's door while he was out running errands. When he saw the official-looking envelope lying on his welcome mat, his stomach sank. Something about it felt ominous, like a storm cloud rolling in. Sure enough, when he opened it, he found a formal notice. Noah's maternal grandparents, Margaret and Harold, were filing for full custody of him. They claimed that Daniel, as a virtual stranger, wasn't equipped to care for Noah properly. Daniel read the letter 3 times, each word sinking deeper into his chest like a weight. His hands trembled as he set it down on the kitchen counter. This couldn't be happening, not now, not when they were finally starting to build something real. That evening, Daniel called Rachel. She listened quietly as he explained the situation, her voice filled with sympathy. "They've always been protective of Noah," she said. "After Anna died, they stepped in to raise him. They probably see you as a threat." "But I'm his father," Daniel argued, frustration bubbling over. "Doesn't that mean anything?" "It does," Rachel assured him. "But courts look at what's best for the child, not just biology. You'll need to prove you're ready to take responsibility for him." The next day, Daniel hired a lawyer named Ms. Peterson, recommended by Ethan. She was sharp and no-nonsense with years of experience handling family law cases. After reviewing the details, she laid out a plan. Gather evidence of Daniel's commitment to Noah, including photos, witness statements, and documentation of their growing relationship. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. In the meantime, tensions escalated. Margaret and Harold reached out to Noah directly, urging him to choose sides. At first, Noah tried to stay neutral, torn between loyalty to the only family he'd ever known and the newfound connection with Daniel. But during one particularly heated conversation, Noah snapped. "Why are you doing this?" he shouted at Daniel during their weekly visit. "You didn't care about me before. Why do you suddenly want to fix everything now?" The words hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. He wanted to defend himself, to explain how much he regretted not being there sooner. But he knew now wasn't the time. Instead, he simply nodded, letting Noah vent his anger. "I understand why you feel that way," he said gently, "and maybe I deserve some of it. But I promise you, Noah, I'm here because I want to be, not because I feel obligated." Noah didn't respond. He stormed off, leaving Daniel standing alone in the driveway, heartbroken but unwilling to give up. Determined to fight for his son, Daniel threw himself into preparing for the custody hearing. He spent hours organizing photo albums, writing letters detailing his plans for Noah's future, and practicing what he would say in court. Ms. Peterson coached him tirelessly, helping him anticipate questions from the opposing side. Through it all, he leaned on Rachel for support, her steady presence keeping him grounded. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. The courtroom was quiet, except for the faint rustle of papers and the occasional cough. Daniel sat at one table, his hands clasped tightly together, while Margaret and Harold occupied the other. Noah wasn't present. The judge had decided it was better for him to stay home. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he stood up slowly, his legs trembling beneath him. Taking a deep breath, he began. "Your Honor, I won't deny that I made mistakes. For years, I didn't know about my son's existence, and even when I did, I hesitated to step forward. But since meeting Noah, I've realized something. He deserves better than the life I've given him so far. He deserves a father who will love him, guide him, and stand by him no matter what." He paused, glancing at Margaret and Harold. "I respect how much Noah means to them, and I don't want to take him away from the people who raised him. But I believe we can find a solution that works for everyone, a way for Noah to have both families in his life." Margaret looked away, her lips pressed into a thin line, while Harold stared straight ahead, unmoved. Daniel continued, his voice steadier now. "I may not have been there in the past, but I'm here now, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn Noah's trust and show him that he matters to me." When the session ended, the judge announced that a decision would take several days. Those days felt like an eternity. Daniel barely slept, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if he lost? What if Noah never forgave him? But when the verdict finally came, it was better than Daniel dared to hope. The judge granted joint custody, allowing Noah to split his time evenly between Daniel and his grandparents. While the arrangement required compromise and patience, it gave Daniel exactly what he wanted most: a chance to rebuild his relationship with his son. As he left the courthouse, relief washing over him, Daniel knew the hard work was just beginning. Building a new family wouldn't be easy, especially with lingering resentment and logistical challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. With effort, understanding, and love, they could create something beautiful together, and that was worth fighting for. A serene cemetery scene on a sunny morning, with golden sunlight streaming through tall oak trees. A man in his late 30s kneels beside a simple gravestone engraved with the name Laura Carter, placing fresh white roses at its base. Standing next to him is a young boy with messy brown hair and bright blue eyes, holding a small bouquet of daisies. The atmosphere is peaceful, yet emotional, filled with a sense of closure and connection. In the background, rows of weathered tombstones fade into the soft glow of the horizon. The ruling had come as a relief, but Daniel knew the real work was just beginning. Joint custody meant compromise and patience. It wasn't going to be easy, juggling schedules between his job, his own life, and Noah's time with his grandparents, but Daniel was determined to make it work. He owed that much to Laura, to Noah, and to himself. At first, the arrangement felt awkward. Margaret and Harold were polite but distant, their disapproval lingering beneath every interaction. They didn't trust Daniel fully, not yet, and he couldn't blame them. Trust took time, especially after everything that had happened. So, Daniel focused on what mattered most, building a stronger bond with Noah. Weekends became sacred for both of them. On Saturdays, Noah would come to Daniel's apartment, and they'd spend the day doing whatever Noah wanted, playing video games, cooking pancakes shaped like animals, or visiting local parks. Sundays were reserved for quieter activities like reading books together or working on puzzles. Slowly, the tension between them began to ease. Noah started opening up more, sharing stories about school, his friends, and even the things he missed about living with his grandparents. One Sunday afternoon, as they sat on the couch flipping through channels, Noah turned to Daniel suddenly. "Do you think Mom would have liked me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Daniel froze for a moment, caught off guard by the question. Then he put down the remote and looked at Noah seriously. "Of course she would have," he said firmly. "She loved you before you were even born. You're her son, just like you're mine. And if she were here now, she'd be so proud of the person you're becoming." Noah seemed to consider this, his expression softening. "I wish I could remember her better," he admitted quietly. "Sometimes I dream about her singing to me, but I can't hear the song." Daniel smiled sadly. "She had a beautiful voice. She used to sing an old folk tune called Down by the Riverside. Want me to teach it to you?" Noah nodded eagerly, and together they spent the rest of the afternoon learning the melody. By the end of the day, Noah could hum along perfectly, his smile brighter than Daniel had ever seen it. As weeks turned into months, their relationship grew stronger. Margaret and Harold began to thaw slightly, seeing how much effort Daniel put into being a good father. They still had moments of tension, but there was a growing understanding that everyone involved only wanted what was best for Noah. Then came the anniversary of Laura's passing, a day Daniel dreaded but also knew was important. He decided to take Noah back to the cemetery where it all began. This time, though, they went together side by side. When they arrived, Daniel carried a bouquet of white roses while Noah held a smaller bunch of daisies he'd picked out himself. Together they approached Laura's grave, standing silently for a moment as the weight of the occasion settled over them. "I brought someone I want you to meet," Daniel said softly, kneeling beside the headstone. He gestured for Noah to step forward. "This is our son Noah. He's smart, funny, and brave, just like you." Noah hesitated, then knelt down too, placing his daisies carefully in front of the stone. "Hi, Mom," he whispered. "I hope you're proud of me. I'm trying my best." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet was comforting, almost sacred. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "We miss you, Laura," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But we're okay. We're figuring things out one step at a time, and we'll keep doing our best. For you." Noah glanced at Daniel, his bright blue eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thanks for bringing me here," he murmured. "It feels nice." Daniel smiled, ruffling Noah's hair affectionately. "Anytime, buddy, anytime." As they walked away from the cemetery hand in hand, Daniel felt a sense of peace wash over him. Life hadn't turned out the way he'd planned. It rarely did. But he was learning to embrace the unexpected twists and turns. Losing Laura had left a void that would never fully heal, but discovering Noah had given him something new. Purpose. In the days that followed, Daniel noticed subtle changes in himself. He laughed more often, found joy in the little things, and woke up each morning with a renewed sense of determination. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive. And so, their journey continued, not without challenges, but with hope. Together, Daniel and Noah built a future rooted in love, resilience, and the memories of those who came before them. Through laughter, tears, and countless shared moments, they proved that family isn't defined by blood alone. It's built through effort, understanding, and the willingness to grow together. As they drove home from the cemetery that day, the sun setting in hues of orange and pink, Daniel glanced at Noah sitting beside him. His heart swelled with gratitude for Laura, for Noah, and for the second chance he'd been given. Whatever lay ahead, he knew they'd face it together. After all, that's what families do.